Hello and welcome to Feedback. It is our special Christmas Eve edition. We have all decided to forgo seeing families, loved ones, liked ones, Coco, all those things, to be here and talk about video games. We're gonna sleep here. Apparently Santa's gonna show up and leave us gifts, maybe slippers, so we can make it through the very, very cold weather that LA is experiencing. I'm very happy to be joined by Abby Happy, Patrick Klepek.
Hello.
And playing Santa for us on this fine day is Rob Manuel.
Thank you.
That's actually really good.
It's been working on that for 7 years.
Yeah,
years.
fact. I think that's you over at the Grove, and that's why Santa keeps on looking away from me. I thought it was from things I had done.
I need a place to sleep.
That gingerbread house is pretty elaborate over at the Grove, though. So
Inside, it's crap.
Obviously, most of the year is wrapped up. We've done best of the year. All those things have happened. But because it's 2009 and it is closing out, obviously this is when everyone in press, not just gaming press, but in all types of press, get kind of wistful and look back on the decade that was. And I believe that in most news outlets, this is independent of gaming, and actually probably just the opposite of gaming, are saying that 2000 to 2000, through 2009 was like the worst American decade in history. So
it's pretty sad.
Yeah. Let's put that one in our pipe
Also,
and smoke it.
Are we calling it the aughts? Is that what we're
The
calling it?
naughties.
Are we calling it that? Because I don't approve.
I go for the
Thumbs
naughties.
down.
I think we
had
should take.
9 years to disapprove of that.
I have never approved it at any point during the 9 years.
I think as time goes on, it'll probably just follow kind of post World War I left bank thinking and just call it the forgotten decade. We're just going to move on.
I love the forgotten decade.
So, you know what? We're not thinking about tomorrow and Christmas and all of us just being here in the office. We're going to think about things that have happened for the past 10 years. And so what we've drawn up a list, and we might go off this list, about some of the games of all the people in attendance here really think stood out for them personally since 2000. Patrick, you and I...
We do. We have a shared love.
Yes. We have a shared love from a game that is... It's right there at the beginning of the decade.
It is. I was a little afraid that it was going to be a 1999 game, but Deus Ex: Warren Spector's best game, I think, and still in a lot of ways still stands up and has had a lot of influence on games these days. Is Deus Ex was kind of like the beginning. Like we're seeing games like Borderlands, like the first-person RPG. Like Deus Ex did that almost 10 years ago and did it so phenomenally well. I have so many fond memories of playing that game like 7 or 8 times just to play it different ways.
I think one of the things that also stood out for me is, prior to 2000, I really wasn't much of an RPG fan. The isometric look, I always thought kind of, I'll even say it's for Baldur's Gate, which I did enjoy, but you get those glorious cutscenes with the orcs and the people just jumping up with swords in the air. And then you get to the game and you're like, yeah, maybe you should have brought down my expectation there in the opening cutscene. Deus Ex was the first experience for me where I really felt I was growing the character and that I really was very much that character inside of that world.
Well, and the thing is like it kind of tricked you into the RPG element in so much that like those Baldur's Gate, I was not a fan of those games. I wasn't a big fan of the D&D and like putting skill points into things that wasn't really what I was interested in. And Deus Ex kind of tricked you because it was a shooter where you were investing those skill points, so you were kind of getting indoctrinated into liking an RPG without knowing that you were liking an RPG.
Abby, did you play Deus Ex?
No.
You didn't play Deus Ex, Rob?
I only played a little bit of it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
criminal.
It's one of those where I would say, God, you should check it out. I
No.
don't recommend that.
I have not played it since, but I don't think I would because I doubt
Right.
it holds up as well. And
it was brutally hard and a level of difficulty for certain reasons I think that none of us would actually have any patience with. And I think that's going to be one of the interesting things we're going to see when we go through some of these games is that there's our memories and then there's the idea of like, can it actually hold up
Yeah,
these
I've
days?
gone back to play some games like Dark Forces that I remember being like the most awesome game ever, and then I'm like, wow, it just doesn't quite look like
there's
I
some
remember
memories
it looking.
left.
Yeah.
left where
I
they
must have
are.
had a
Half-Life
Gandhi-esque
1.
level of patience at some times
Mm-hmm.
back then. I do think the other thing that's most significant about Deus Ex is you can really see its impact on a lot of games out there. That blending and that hybrid of something that does involve kind of more of a real-time skill, but you're really building up stuff on the back end in terms of your character and the whole idea of branching past. I wouldn't go so far as to say that's the first one to do that, but it really did seem to have many elements of choice that were put into the game.
Between the characters and the story, it felt like you had several different kinds of meaningful impact on where the game went. And I specifically remember being so excited when I figured out like where the spot was where I could save my game, where you could choose the 3 different endings. So you had different things you could influence throughout the game, but you weren't really influencing the story. You were just like, if you went into like the women's bathroom and you thought you had gotten away with like pillaging around in there, one of the characters would point out, I saw you go into the women's bathroom.
Yeah.
Like I had never had a game comment on something like that before when it wasn't sort of like a structured conversation. It was, you never would have seen that if the game didn't note that you had triggered like the women's bathroom door, and then they
spent a
call
lot of
you
time
out
in
as a
women's
pervert.
bathroom.
Is that why you do it now?
Virtual women's bathrooms is different.
We have to
I was
kick 'em
much
out all the
younger.
time
Really?
upstairs. Yeah.
It's
And
really nice in there. I've never been.
it's not as nice as ours, unfortunately. So I'm really just, it's prejudice.
That's true.
And I think it's worth noting, Deus Ex was one. It was the only really strong game that came out of the long forgotten Ion Storm debacle.
That's
You know,
true,
with,
that
with,
was.
with IDOS. It was made in Austin and not in the famous building in Dallas where Anachronox and Daikatana
Although
were made.
I will defend Anachronox. I do love
I
that
love
game.
that game. It was one of the best written games ever. It's very, very funny. Just
A
terribly
horrible
incomplete.
combat system.
Abby, one game that's on your list, which I know is so near and dear to your heart, is Metroid Prime.
Yeah, it was like, for me, it was a perfect combination of shooter, but almost like you were saying, you don't realize you're playing an RPG. It's like I wasn't even paying attention in a way to the shooter elements of it because the rest of it is so fully fleshed out. There's the exploration, there's all the things that you become accustomed to from the Metroid games, all the special abilities when you play through just phenomenal boss battles and a world that is so cool and so engaging. I've gone back and played that game maybe 4, 5, 6 times.
That one really does hold up. I mean,
Yeah.
as I've said in the past, I personally feel like I sometimes need a walkthrough because if I look away from the game, I lose my place.
It's hard to come back to. You almost just have to start over.
Yeah. But, you know, and you call it a shooter, and I guess I've always been so reticent. Yes, there is shooting. Yes, it is played from the first-person perspective. But, you know, you can go for so long in that game without ever finding an enemy.
There's a lot of
That-
periods of just quiet.
Yeah, and I've never known what to. I've never found a good word to actually describe what I think Metroid Prime is.
It's like the exploration part of Metroid. That was one of the biggest fears. Like when I first saw the game, it was like, oh, what are they going to do? What are they taking? Love Metroid, love Super Metroid. Go
Me
through it
too.
like over and over and over again. And it was just one of those times when it was like, oh, what are you doing? Taking this perfectly wonderful exploration 2D model and turning it into 3D. And I was
But it worked.
But it works. It does
And the
work
music
because
was beautiful,
the music,
too.
it is the exploration that you really see in this first person shooter that it just carries over to like so many others. Like, you know, one of the games I have is like Fallout 3, where it is a lot of exploration, a lot of you are by yourself. It's
Well,
the
and
isolation.
that's it, the isolation. It's not because
It's
in
the
every game you're
isolation.
exploring, but what makes the Metroid series so unique and what is that you're Samus and you're by yourself. You
It's
have
you.
no one to rely
No.
on. Like, it's the isolation aspect, and they
course.
got that so well in Metroid
Absolutely.
Prime. Is you felt alone, and it was kind of calming, but then at times it was terrifying, and like that's the cool part about
Right,
the
right. Like
isolation aspect.
you would lose your place if you looked away from the screen a little too long, or if you came back to it like a week later. It's like, where am I?
Where was I?
Yeah.
I thought I saw this.
I mean, it is so lonely. I have to just wonder. I mean, have you ever thought about like Samus just kind of writing poetry? Kind of like Emily Dickinson, just sort of up in a room. It's just, it really is one of
hadn't
the
until
loneliest
now.
games I've ever played. And it's, you know, actually one of the other ones that we're going to be talking about later, Eco, is another one that kind of gets close to that sense of just sort of distance and that, no one's really coming by
Shadows
to say
the
hi.
Colossus is
Shadow
also
Colossus.
on the list,
Yeah.
and there's a very
we like being lonely, apparently.
Yeah, we've
They're
done nothing
lonely
about
people.
ourselves.
With Metroid, remember when they showed the first shots of that? I think it was Space World, maybe.
Yeah, there was like I think it might have been like the
2001.
last
yeah.
Space World too.
And there was
yeah.
that was the one where everyone was okay with Mario, and that was Sunshine, which turns out to be probably of the 3 games the one that everyone wishes they could forget the most.
Yeah.
Obviously there was Zelda Wind Waker, which I just adore.
I
But,
love it
No,
but
too.
Metroid, correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time it looked like it was going to be a third-person game.
because they only
That's
I
where
remember-
Retro was going to go with
They had
it.
only showed a CG trailer. I remember it was like Samus running down
Yeah.
a tube
Yeah,
with a
that
bunch
was
of
it.
So whereas with like Wind Waker, you kind of had an idea where it was going. We didn't really. It was just like, it's a new Metroid game,
Right.
and it's an American studio, and we didn't really. As we learned more about it, it seemed people got more and more skeptical. But I think that's
Right.
why. I think a lot of people cherish the game so much is because it was a complete reinvention, and you
Totally,
just
yeah.
don't see
Defied the
you don't see
expectations.
many of those these days. A lot of it's like remixes of a classic formula. This was a complete reinvention of the concept.
It's almost a rebirth.
Yeah, no, and what's funny is I think that in my head, it's actually more defined the Metroid series than classics like Metroid and Super Metroid. That's how I really see the world. Rob, let's pick one. I think it's another one that's shared by others. Tim Schafer's much maligned by sales, but much loved by the press, Psychonauts.
Psychonauts it's not a perfect game, and that's sort of why we love it even more.
Yeah.
But it's one of those games where the story just touches on so many different things, and it's so perfect. And it's just this, kid escaping from the circus.
Yeah.
Going to
camp.
going to summer camp, and he's seen all these psychics, and he's just trying to fit in. He's the odd one out, and there's love, and there's mystery, and there's danger, and it's just such a world where it's so alien, but it's yet so familiar because it hits on so many different levels
And so imaginative and funny and engaging.
Like trying to sort of like describe it to someone, they would think that you're psychotic. I mean, it's just parts where it's like, oh, you jump into a milkman's head and he's paranoid about everyone, so you have to pick up certain items to confuse other people in this world that's sort of like Escher gone wrong. In order
and
to
painfully devoid of street signs, we should point out to the milkman level.
and just trying to confuse them and think that you are a part of them, or you jump into another level where it looks like a giant board game.
And you're in people's heads.
And you have to help out other people.
And I think
the point.
what Schaefer did so well with that is he broke that curse of the all too familiar in a lot of platformers where it's snow level, fire level.
The hub world. I think it had a unique hub world, and then the branches from that were all completely unique just because the setting made, like, it forced uniqueness. There was no way to just do a snow level.
And that hub world was so cool anyway because it was something that's so familiar to so many people, and at the same time it had just this weird and quirky spin. I love the kids that were in the mess hall playing the band, and like when Dogen walks out of the water and goes hacky sack because he doesn't have a brain. It's just like the writing in it is just so charming and so engaging, and there is I go back and I play that game just about once a year. Because I need to get my
it's something. And it is true. It isn't perfect, and it's in those later levels where there's no lack
one
of
level, right?
Yeah, Meat Circus.
Meat Circus. The Milkman level, which I always had, all it needed was some street signs so I could actually figure out which way I was going.
That's part of the
You have to
beauty
get
of
the
it.
helicopter, and then
Yes, it's one of those. It had such a story, and Patrick, you know this went through a lot of people's hands. Found exactly the wrong publisher, and this is in large part while there was such a groundswell from the press behind Brutal Legend. But if you don't mind detailing some of the sad story of the development of
it was
Psychonauts.
originally a Microsoft published game, and then Microsoft dropped it along with a couple of other games, and Majesco picked it up. Yeah, was that ever released?
Yeah, it was by Ubisoft.
So.
Terrible.
And so of the two, this one turned out much better. But Majesco picked it up back when they thought they were making a gamble to become a AAA publisher. They were also publishing Advent Rising at the time. I thought was going to be a big trilogy. Didn't work out so well. And so, Psychonauts kind of got pushed to the side. And, I mean, Schaefer to this day will say the game didn't do as poorly as everyone sort of thinks it did. But for how much love for the game that there was, it didn't do as well as people hoped it did. And I think Psychonauts, too, had a much better balance than Brutal Legend did in terms of balancing the humor and the gameplay, and where the gameplay services the humor and where the humor services the gameplay. And even the weak parts of Psychonauts, like, it was okay because the other parts are making up for it. I didn't feel that as much in Brutal Legend.
Right. Like, even if there was a part that you didn't like it was like, well, this part is just not as creative as this other part. You were only in there for so long.
Exactly.
And then you would
because you were going to a different world
every
time.
Single time.
Even the ones that you didn't find as interesting,
different.
20 minutes, an hour later, you were somewhere else.
It very much defines like why I always look at Ghosts and Goblins as that big influential game for me, is that I just want to see what the next thing was. That it's okay if I'm having trouble now because there's this reward of some imagination and creativity that's down the line. The game that I've understood was kind of favored over Psychonauts at Microsoft, and this one just was what breaks my heart was Voodoo Vince, which does not really stand out in anybody's mind. And if you look at their art style, there was on a very superficial level, some similarity, and it looked like that there was a contest between the two. Unfortunately, Voodoo Vince won over Psychonauts, which just needed a really big hug. And Advent Rising was just anyway. So now we've gone through all four of you, so we're going to go back to the beginning again. Patrick, you have some on your list that are actually a little bit more sort of well known and seminal. Let's pick the big one, Halo.
Yeah, so Halo, I have really fond memories for a couple of reasons. One, because it was super big when my freshman year and sophomore year of college. Even though people had moved on to other, Halo wasn't the game of the moment. That
Right.
because we were in, and you probably have memories of different LAN games, like when your entire dorm is networked.
Yes.
Like there are
Yes.
very few situations where you have that on a day-to-day basis. And so Halo was our game where any day you could boot up Halo and find like 5 or 6 really intense networked games going on. And like it was really amazing. And I just have a lot of fun memories of coming back from class and like that. Me and my friends would just do that all night, was playing networked Halo.
We
I'm
had-
sorry, you just talked about how your dorm was networked. I'm sitting here thinking about how
I shouldn't have
I
looked
was
at you.
working on a Mac
I-
Classic, and my roommate actually had a Brother word processor. So
Typewriters,
No, no.
network typewriters.
We had the same thing. We also had to go through like a third party like website in
Yeah.
order to hook up with other people.
Yeah.
But we could name ourselves different things, and we constantly named ourselves after the Golden Girls.
oh, that's cool.
And so we would fight over who would be Dorothy or Blanche or Rose.
Who were you?
I was usually Dorothy.
Okay.
And we would go out, and you wouldn't believe how many fights people wanted to pick with us, being named after the Golden Girls, and we
course.
would tear them apart.
Well, and Halo 2, in addition to the network thing, was one of the first games that I stopped playing games over and over again once I'd kind of like graduated from like the 16-bit era. I would play a game and went to the next one. But Halo, by its structure, was so much fun to play over and over again in co-op. And it was one of the first games where I would go back and play on Legendary, and like I had fun doing that with friends. That's not something
Right.
I normally did, but I found myself constantly going back to that game because the combat scenarios were so different every time, and that was the first time where
Right.
it really felt like the AI was, dynamically
yes.
coming
Right.
up with tactics. So playing the game again really felt meaningful.
It was also one of the first games that really brought first-person shooters to the consoles. It was like one of those games where it was like, you're only giving me 2 guns? Are you kidding me? I need 5 guns
Yeah.
at all times and be able to. I mean, it was one of those concepts. It was like, well, this isn't going to work. Why am I only getting? But then it was like, wow, I sort of get it. Started like the aiming system, just all of a sudden just felt,
Aiming and the control system are pretty much what everyone adopted
Everyone
going
had
forward
after
after
that.
that.
Well, also, I mean, you didn't have. I mean, GoldenEye being an aberration. I mean, as classic as it was an aberration. The idea of a first-person shooter on a console
Ugh.
was just, no, there was just no precision. No one believed you could do it. This game actually showed that you could, and now first-person shooters are the dominant genre that you're actually going to be finding on consoles. I mean,
course.
say what you will about the quality of the game, the significance of Halo, I think, is kind of undeniable.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
The one other element was the use of vehicles in a first-person shooter. That was something that also had not been seen before.
Oh God,
I mean,
I hated the Warthog controls
Yeah.
so much
did
for
I.
so long, and now I can't think of any other way of controlling it. It's
Right.
so natural, several games
I'm
in.
gonna have to
But
go.
oh man, like the
It was
first couple
tough
of
at
months
first.
with that, I'm cursing
forever.
Bungie.
Well, and that of the legacy of Halo. I mean, this was the game that Microsoft was riding the Xbox on. It was going to launch with Halo. It was the big deal. And then they had Microsoft used to have GameStop, and that was back in
Yeah.
2001. And they're showing off the Warthog, which even at that point was working even worse than it did in the,
Yeah,
in
that
the release of the
disastrous
game.
E3 showing too,
Yeah.
where the frame rate was like 5 frames a second.
Yeah, no one was really interested in it after
No.
E3.
And then it came out, and no, it was
But
something.
even then,
that-
it wasn't a blockbuster at the start, and that was
No.
always like it was one of those
a slow
one of those
burn.
early slow burn word of mouth games that essentially defined
Everyone had to
Microsoft
play.
as a gaming entertainment company.
Yeah, because I remember actually I can't remember the name of this game. The first Xbox games that we got when we got our debug. So we got our debug about a month before we started seeing any game show up. The first game was something out of IDOS. It was a racing game, but it was on foot and it had animals.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Mad Dash or
Mad
Something
Dash.
like that,
That's,
yeah.
that's
I'm
where
glad
we
I
go.
remember that
There
in
you
my
go.
memory banks.
So, Abby, one of the games you have was just well loved by X-Play before you showed up in our fine life. That was Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
Which I also
See, I
think
would have
is-
gone with the transition of games we played in college and gone with Counter-Strike Source, which is I forgot to put on there. I think now I'm like, well, because a lot of people were playing Halo. I played a little bit with my brother when I was home, and I was then I made fun of him mercilessly for being a console gamer.
Oh, how times have
I know.
changed.
So, anyway, but my, huge for me in college. I mean, before that, because I had been playing Counter-Strike and Team Fortress, but since those weren't made in the, aughts.
See, you
Yeah,
made
I
it
know,
too.
right? It's not, but
The
I
forgotten decade.
But Counter-Strike Source just was huge and one of my favorite games of the last decade. So I just thought I'd throw that out there before we went. Yeah,
When
Resident Evil.
did Counter Strike, the like as the mod? When did that first arrive on the scene?
Well, Counter-Strike Source or Counter-Strike?
Counter Strike proper.
Counter-Strike proper would have been 1997 or
Yeah, that sounds a little early.
Eight
I don't
maybe.
know.
Because there was Team Fortress and then there was Counter-Strike, and then Counter-Strike Source was 2002, I think.
So yeah, it's
There's also a random
But
Counter
then
Strike
again,
for
I mean, there were
Xbox.
so many mods and so many like different iterations of all of those. It's like I missed Half-Life Opposing Force by like 2 months with our decade stuff. That's what I'm bummed about. But you know, and so anyway, I had to throw that one out there because that was my college, and I used to get banned off the servers by my boyfriend at the time because I was way better at him.
wow.
Yeah, and I would walk all the way across campus to his dorm and be like, dude, you know, what are you doing? I get him really mad.
See, I remember Load Runner in college. I'm just kind of just wondering what my college life would have been like had networking
Networked
and all
Load
those
Runner.
fancy
Angrier.
PS
That
was
things.
awesome.
You know,
Yeah, a lot
being
angrier.
available. But Resident Evil 4, since we're still on
Yeah.
you there.
One of my favorite, again, it's like a game that I continually, once a year or something, like, I gotta go back and play it again. And it's like I almost don't even know what it is about that iteration of it because I played all of the Resident Evil games. I love them, but that one just always sticks in my mind. And because it was scary, it was fun, there was fast-paced stuff. I don't know. There was something that, and it was
control
more
the
humor
camera.
to it.
Almost like Metroid Prime, like Resident Evil was pretty goddamn stale at that
Yeah.
point. Like Code Veronica, I liked that game, but I could never probably go back and play it.
Right.
No, I've tried that
Resident
too.
Resident Evil 4 like reinvented that, made it like a modern action game. It wasn't the sluggish. I mean, it still has you can't run and shoot at the same time, but at the time,
didn't
already
matter at the time.
It
Like, it
didn't
was
matter at the time.
amazing
That,
at the
that
time.
wasn't a criticism at
No,
the time.
no.
But and I think that was one of the big things was like it was a completely new situation. Like you weren't just fighting the normal zombies, and then the new controls just gave completely new life.
And
to that
Leon
game.
Kennedy was dead sexy. I mean, I know that's why you guys played it.
Oh,
Yes,
all the
exactly.
time.
Right?
I mean, he was the
No,
Leonardo
just
DiCaprio of
agreement.
video games.
Just me? Really?
No.
Oh, all right. Never mind.
Doesn't.
There'll be someone in the comments. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
that'll be
Sure.
fine.
yeah.
I was terrible too. I used to make Ashley kneel and just execute
So
her.
I do believe that the controls were essential to the success of that game because there's no way that the classic controls for Resident Evil were just going to because around that same time Capcom was doing the redo versions of Resident Evil and there was Resident Evil 0
Right.
and by that point I'm like no I can't do this anymore. I have grown, you too shall grow with, and we got that with Resident Evil 4. But I mean, they changed so much about the series as well. Of course, they put it in Spain. You didn't have traditional zombies.
There's also the like almost like
Plagas.
Metroid. The boss fights are
Right.
incredibly memorable.
Okay,
from
the
RE4.
first time you go down in the kind of cellar area and you see the regenerators and and the Iron Maiden with the spikes and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
That was and they're like wandering for you and you know that you got to find the plagas in their body to shoot out. Like holy crap. Like I was scared. I'm like hide in the dumpster, hide in the dumpster.
yeah.
Oh my god.
And
run.
the ogre scene when you fight like the giant
Yeah.
ogre, that was so. I mean,
Oh, come on.
I died like 5 or 6 times, so it wasn't as tense by the time I actually put him down.
El
but
Gigante.
Well, the chainsaw guys. I mean,
yeah,
Chainsaw
that was.
Donato.
I mean,
That's
that
when
was
you
like,
What am I gonna do? Run,
Run,
climb,
and you hear that
climb.
revving
Although-
behind you and you're like
Actually, Resident Evil 4 is why I gave up on 5.1 sound because I was playing it one time and there was a sound from behind me and I was just too tense. And that damn speaker too close to my ear, I jumped so badly that I threw my back out and couldn't even play the game for the next 4 days. It's yeah. I mean, I
do
realized
you still
I,
not have 5.1
I
sound
still
because
don't do
of this?
5.1 because it's just that, I'm already assuming that the bad thing is about to happen at any given minute, and I don't need to just have it coming from behind. I'd rather it just come from ahead of me. Right. That's just me. Okay, I'm picking a game now.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
This is one that really made a difference for me, and that was Eco. I think that was
yes.
the transformative moment when it's like, hold on, a game can do something different, and I think even at the time it was like, okay, what am I putting my finger on that this game is so effective about? But it really felt like, okay, things. I don't want to say it's moved into art because I hate that whole video games art. They're definitely artistic,
Yeah.
but it was doing something very, very different and very, very daring. And it goes back to that feeling of loneliness. And it was telling a story about a very kind of about a relationship without in any way spoon feeding you what was going on.
Yeah.
You had to pay a lot of attention to that game.
I mean, you really felt a connection to the girl. Like, you had to protect her because there was nothing else between her and these creatures that would come out of nowhere the whole time. But then she was also that person that would, like, you know, wouldn't follow you the whole time. So you also had a sort of love-hate relate. And that's what's great about video games, is that you can tell a story without having to go to the cutscene. You can tell a story without having to put in dialogue. You can tell a story without, as you said, spoon-feeding the people. It's like, you love this girl. No. Just let me interact with her. Let me be with her for a little bit. Let me try to escape this really, like, beautiful but mysterious and dark place.
Yeah.
And fall in love with her that way.
And what I thought was really amazing about the game was that the isolation aspect was amplified by the fact that you didn't know what they were saying.
Right.
Like, when she would speak to you, you were just like, it was just come up as gibberish. And I thought that was really a masterstroke. And I was always frustrated when they eventually did, like, you could, like, translate it in a special edition.
That's right.
And I never looked at that because I was like, that was part of the magic of the game, was that you really didn't know what was
idea.
going
You don't
on.
need to know.
The whole basis of the game was that you just have to save her,
Yeah.
and you just feel this impulse to do so.
Exactly.
Not because there's a mythology that's particularly interesting.
We're
Right.
programmed to save the. I mean, it's
Save the
Mario,
princess.
save the princess, save the
Yeah.
girl. It's
And
the
it's a
most
castle.
natural instinct of video gaming
Right.
ever.
But I think also by having the boy
For
come across as
paddles
younger
and
than
Right.
the girl, and there's nothing that this wasn't, oh, I'm tough man,
No,
you
he's
frail
not
lady.
tough.
He's actually, you know, if she was at perfect health, I think she would have actually been the lead. Probably. So, it was fascinating just to watch it play out, and to also watch that game be the violation of one of those sanctified rules, which is escort missions suck. That entire game was an escort mission,
Oh, yeah.
and it never bothered me the whole time. It was a puzzle game without having overt puzzles. There was a little bit of action, but it was probably, you know, I don't want to say the least satisfying,
No.
but it was definitely not,
It was
you
to
know,
keep you on
what
your
you
toes.
need to get in there for. It's a wonderful mixture of different game types, and I think as opposed to a lot of the stuff that we see on our list, I don't think anyone tries to copy Eco, except for you know, the guy who made Eco.
Well, and I
And
think
he can.
partially that is because, like, games by definition, like, aren't very minimalistic, and Eco in a lot of ways is forced minimalism.
Right.
Like, not a lot of different gameplay mechanics, not a lot of story, and game designers, you know, just by nature of, you know, the technology in games, want to go wild and put as much as they can in. And
Right.
Eco is a very restrained effort, and restraint is not something you usually see
No,
in
no,
games.
no.
Now, I think the other thing that just fascinates me about it is that this is one of those mini games where Sony seems to have a lot of tolerance for games that take forever to make, that almost from the get-go seem to be destined never to find a mass audience. It is, I mean, we're about to see that with Heavy Rain, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And it's always kind of, you know, we always like to bag on Sony and think that there's something sort of evil in their machinations. But this is one of those instances where it's like, wow, I don't see Microsoft, nor do I see Nintendo actually throwing money after something this unique, and thankfully they did, actually.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like how we've been talking about EA and how they had all their new IPs and everything, and we kind of glossed over the fact that Sony's actually been doing that for a fair amount of time.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean,
They pretty much let a way to do is whatever he wants for as long as he wants, and sure, it's not gonna. You know, Shadow of the Colossus sold okay, and I mean,
But it was
probably
a great game.
Probably
Amazing.
Last Guardian will as well, but there is sort of an, you know, it's not going to be a
They're not-
blockbuster.
yeah,
it's
exactly.
like the weird, like, Fox Searchlight. It's like this weird
Yeah,
indie
exactly.
channel they have that they're okay with knowing that they're just going to get critical acclaim for it, and it's that where EA tried to take those games and market
Market them. Right.
them up, bring them into AAA. Sony seems okay with, you know what? As long as this is a moderate success, we're going to get some critical acclaim. That'll probably let people give us a little leeway on other things. And so where Sony is okay with it, saying it's sort of that middle ground, like EA tried to elevate that, and that kind of blew back at them.
It also, I remember the game was used before the launch of the PS2 to kind of show off the water effects, because that was the big thing back then.
Because it was a
Is
PS1 game
Right.
originally,
Was it?
too.
Oh, okay. That I didn't know. I just remember it was almost presented initially as a tech demo, because there was this little area that you could run around, but you could jump into the water. And all
And
of a sudden,
then
oh my
swim.
god, look at the
Yeah.
concentric circles in the water. It's like real. Yeah.
You know, yeah, it was a PS1 game. I remember Ueda saying that one of the reasons it wasn't like a big technological Wizardry thing was because they just didn't have a lot of time, and so they just kind of ported a bunch of the assets over, and I think that actually probably helped the game,
yes.
and so much as like it gave it its sort of unique look.
We might as well, Rob, just move on to the other game in that Hallowed. You can't call it a franchise, but you do feel
feels
they're all
like-
Sort of like the
interconnected.
same, it has the
Yeah.
same feeling, like the Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, Shadow of the Colossus is the one we're talking about.
I mean, once again, we have the isolation. You don't even know what the story is going into this. Like
Yeah.
you're basically carrying a girl. You're assuming your girlfriend, your whatever, your
love.
sister, your love, and
Maybe
basically
your sister.
yeah, maybe your sister.
Affection.
Affection.
Your baker. Maybe she was
Sure.
making nice pastries.
And basically, voice from the heavens says, "Hey, you kill these guys, we'll bring her back." And that's
And then
all
you're
you
off.
get. I mean, there's no enemy between you and what would be considered a boss in any other game.
Yeah.
It is
Right.
literally boss after boss after boss after boss. And then it's, this world that's sort of creepy. It's this world that you
Quiet
don't
and lonely,
quite understand.
lonely
And there's
again.
different things as well. It's like the apples, the lizards that you have to go through. It's like they don't come out and say, "Oh, get the apples, it'll help your health. Get the lizards, it'll help your holding." Or
Yeah.
yeah,
You're right. The whole
grip.
thing. Yeah.
And it was like they never said that. They just basically was like, "This is what you got," and you only had the weapons, the same weapons that you had from the very beginning. You have the very end, and they basically just throw these monsters at
Giant.
you. These giant monsters. The first time you see one of the giant monsters, they cut away, or they don't cut away, but they basically they make it letterbox. And you see, it's just like the foot comes in, the next foot comes in. And it's like, go for him.
Yeah, and it's spectacular too because at that point there's really not much in the world around you. It's rocks and
Right.
it's very sparse. And then there's just this, colossus.
Yes, a
exactly.
Colossus. I think what's also remarkable is that the actual real estate of the game is quite impressively large.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And there's nothing.
No.
I mean,
Just a wasteland.
that's the part that is like, wow, that is daring. I mean, you can imagine how many people must have said, "Sure, you don't want to have something in there that
There's a
you're
tree.
going
Oh,
to
would
do,
put
going
like
from point A
another,
to
like
point
an
B?"
enemy, like something like a
Yeah.
little
And then
encampment? It's like, no.
but like that sense of loss, and this is true of Eco as well, is that both of them take place in environments that imply that at one point they have been quite glorious,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
and that now they've just fallen into disrepair to the point that you don't
Yeah.
even know what they were once intended for. That it's
Exactly.
just that there's a sense of extinction, and
Yeah.
that's very
Right.
present in the Shadow of
and
the
it's
Colossus.
and it's funny as well. Like as you're playing the game, like it's literally you defeat the boss, you go back, go to the next one, you defeat him, and then somewhere in the middle, like a little bit towards the later end of the game, you see that cutscene where some people are coming in to the game itself, someone from the outside, and all of a sudden you get very protective of what's going on. You're like, who are these people? Why are they coming into my game? I've been going through the. I got to stop this.
And one of the things that I thought was really profound about Shadow of the Colossus was that traditionally in games like the bosses you go up against, they're set up as sort of an evil creature that's out, a malicious creature out to get you,
Yeah.
stop you from a goal. I always felt bad attacking these creatures because they didn't really do
No,
anything.
I
to
kind
me.
of wanted to hug them. They were big and furry.
Yeah, and you're
Some
and
of
you're
them
and
very
you're
furry.
and they seem when they're attacking you, it's a defense mechanism because
exactly.
you've invaded their territory
Of
and you're
course.
murdering them for
A lot of
whatever vague plot and that's actually one of the cool things about the game is that you only have a vague reasoning why you're
Yeah.
going forth, but it almost plays on traditional game conventions because you got to kill the boss because you get the item that resurrects the girl,
And that's
but you're given no real reason
great
except that's a
part of the
game
story.
convention
That's
and
a great
you're
part.
killing these innocent creatures because that's what you do in a game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really just plays into the overall story of the game itself. As you find out what happens at the end, it goes, those creatures.
The developer, what's the guy's name again?
Fumito Ueda.
Oh, wait.
Ueda. I mean, I've always wondered if Ueda and Miyazaki actually talked because you see these thematic similarities, this kind of affection for nature and this real sense of distaste for what humans have done to it, and like getting rid of that sense of magic. It's or maybe there's a certain like brand of Japanese creativity that seems to be
Right.
just sort of
From the-
missing.
They come from the same
Missing
school of
something
thought.
very Shinto in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk about a more modern game that's on your list, Patrick, and also on Rob's list, and actually it should have been on mine
Yeah,
as well.
I mean,
And that is
it's kind of a given.
It's from
Speaking
last
of
year,
Wastelands,
Fallout 3.
yeah,
It really is just I think it's become the gold standard, even though Bethesda really built its name in the Elder Scrolls games.
Right.
They really came into their own and said, hey, world, look at what we can do with Fallout 3.
I remember when we first saw it years
Yeah.
ago in Washington, D.C.
I just gasped.
I know, or Bethesda, really. Oh, God. It was, I know. We sat there, we watched a demo for like 45 minutes. We watched Todd Howard play for like an hour.
And they walked into...
the subways.
No, even before that, I'm blanking. Megaton. I was back in
Megaton
Barter
City.
Town.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Megaton first.
When
And
they
then
start talking about the bomb.
everyone in the room kind of went, oh. Because up until that point, even though we were seeing a lot of post-apocalyptic themed stuff, it hadn't been done. And suddenly it's like, this is my Mad Max fantasy come to life.
And then they walked us through downtown and super mutants, and I just the whole time I was sitting there with my jaw on the floor, like I can't wait for this game. It felt like the longest wait ever before that came out.
Well, and the thing that the reason I told Fallout 3 so near and dear is that I traditionally am not a big fan of open world games. I get freaked out when I have a million different choices in front of me.
I understand.
When I play a first person shooter, if I can go left and right, I go halfway down the left, I turn right around, I go down the right path to see if I missed anything. And so so Fallout, I was like, this sounds really cool, post-apocalyptic Mad Max, but there is going to be so many friggin' choices in this game that I don't know if I'm going to enjoy myself because I just tend to like directed linear experiences. But I fell in love with Fallout 3, and they did such a good job of pushing you along the linear experience when you wanted it, but those little arrows in the corner, which I've talked to Todd Howard about, he's like, we worked on those for so long because that was a big thing for them, was they wanted these carrots to get you to explore, but if you don't want to, you know exactly where to go next, but we want to push you off the path, but we don't want it to be, here's point A to point B, and then there are a bunch of things you can discover. We want to show you where you can find those things, and those arrows, I remember he said they worked for months changing the variables in those to get just the right amount so that you kept pushing forward, but you didn't get totally lost. And that's exactly the experience I had with Fallout. It was like I'd go for 6 hours where I explored and then I'm back onto the next story.
Yeah, see, I would put point A and point B and then just do everything in between them.
Exactly.
And then get
I
to
wanted
point
to
B.
fill those little arrows. I wanted that to fill white. Like I didn't like it when there was as soon as a blank one showed up, and I'd be right next to the next story mission. I was like, and I'd have to pull up the map and see how far it was.
I did the completely opposite. As soon as I got out of the vault, I just picked a
Ran
place
free.
and just ran. I just started going. I just started looking at everything. Like every door was like something new and magical. Every place was just a new experience. Like I love Fallout 3, not because of the story that they were trying to tell. I love Fallout 3 because of the story that I got to tell through playing the game. It was. I would come into the office and it was like, guys, you won't believe what happened to me.
We shared Fallout stories
like,
every day.
And that's the magic of it, is that is a game where every time you pick it up and you play it, it's like a little different story. It's a little different experience. It's something a little bit almost magical. And it's almost like, if this is your game, no one else is going to get this experience.
Exactly.
No one else.
We had someone here who didn't make it to Megaton and took Rob's thing and went a little bit too far. Past Megaton, and then just started kind of living out there in the wasteland and was keeping most of their supplies and clothes in mailboxes.
I know two people
and
who
whenever
played
the
like
small
this.
town with all the fire ants.
This is awesome.
You just live up on the cot, like one of the burned out like mattresses you would find. And you would just sleep there.
Probably it was already a desperate situation in Fallout 3.
Just
someone managed
embraced
to
it.
have a truly homeless experience playing the
We
game.
found it out because I think I was talking to him and I'm like, well, why don't you just store it in your house? And he's
like,
like,
what
what?
house?
Why do that when I've got 1,000 mailboxes?
I didn't have a house for the longest
That's
time.
what I wish there
couldn't
was like
figure
the
out what's
Animal
going on.
Crossing 7 place where I could go into his town, just loot all of his
it's kind of like a
mailboxes.
post-apocalyptic Into the Wild. It's like, no, I'm going to go off and do my own thing.
But it was just so amazing. Like I would tell people, like I was just exploring some place, and then the fish guys, forgot their names.
The Mirelurks?
The Mirelurks,
Yeah.
they were coming in, they were chasing me, and I was running, and they were just killing everything in their path. And then I go into this one building where it has the Russian with his girls. And so it's like, oh, well, I'm safe. I'm obviously in a building. They're forgotten about me. I'm going to put on my nice suit. I'm going to talk to this guy, try to barter. They kick down the door. They kill everyone in there. I run for it. I hide long enough for them to leave, and then I just loot the place.
Well, and
That's
that-
not bad. I like that.
And
one.
see, that's the
Robin
thing
is
is that
army of
the
Mirelurks.
Yeah, exactly.
the main story of Fallout I don't particularly like. I don't think it's a very good story. It is a very unsatisfying ending that's kicked into the ground even further by the way they handle the ending with the DLC. But everything in the world was the side story, the side writing, and plus added to your own experience with
Yeah.
the world's
Yeah.
dynamics was what made the game for me. The vault that you discover that has the hallucinogenic properties, where I thought my Xbox had red ringed or
Yeah.
something, and you walk in and there's no experience like this in the rest of the game. It's just one vault that you walk into that you know, as you're reading the terminals, you realize they were performing experiments, you know,
Right.
in all the different
Yeah.
vaults. And in this particular one, they were just releasing like a nerve gas to screw with people's heads.
Yeah, of course.
But it influences your playing. You're seeing double, triple of enemies.
Yeah.
The screen is going red and green. And I literally stopped and was like, is something wrong with my Xbox? And like, it was just such a freaky experience. And like, I was so excited. And that was a game where, yeah, every day you were excited to tell people what you found the night before.
Because you wanted to know what they did.
And you want
Yeah.
to tell people, like, go see that when you play it
Oh,
tomorrow.
yeah.
Like, go to that part of the map.
You have
Like,
to.
that's-
I think it's fitting that we're going to be closing on Fallout 3 because I think what is the achievement of that game, and it's not unique necessarily to that game because we are seeing kind of, you know, the open world and these kind of dynamic games that I'm under the impression that this is where we're going to start to see a lot of the emphasis for the next decade. That, you know, proof of concept seemed to have happened in the aughts. And with this, I mean, I was going to get just some thoughts from you guys about what you think are going to be kind of the standard bearers in terms of types of gameplay going into what do we call them? The teens, I guess.
guess.
Going to teens. Abby, we'll start with you.
Is what kind of games you see on the horizon?
Yeah, what do you see as kind of being those kind of just primary themes? Not guessing the thing that hasn't happened yet, but
Yeah, I'm like, oof. Well, I mean, I think you're going to see a lot more kind of exploration like that. I mean, there's so many tried and true games that are on this list. I don't know if I expect anything terribly innovative. I mean, well, I guess it's hard to judge by this year because this year wasn't particularly innovative in many ways. You know, I don't know. I think you're going to start seeing the death of a lot of different game types. I think people are going to be pushing cooperative more and more. I know that sounds really obvious to say, but it's just coming and I don't really like it a lot. I'm a single person gamer. I
I'm
really
with
hope
you on
I got
that.
really excited about the announcement of Dead Space 2 the other day. I really
Another
am hoping to
isolated
see-
game.
Yeah, I know. You love them.
I know, it's just a trend that I like. But I'm really hoping to see more games that kind of take piecemeal of other games and make them great. I mean, I think all the games that we've talked about today, from Psychonauts and Fallout, have just taken pieces that we like. Borderlands is a game that we've loved recently. It's this combination. You're going to see all of these different game genres kind of combining to make unique takes on existing genres. I don't know. It's not. Maybe it's obvious, but I think
know,
that,
but I like that future.
but I
like
know,
that
because
future.
I think you need to integrate those different things to keep people interested and to keep games feeling fresh and new and not just what we've done before. Because I mean, it's even the shooters that I had put on here and stuff that we didn't get to. It's hard to add that depth to it. That's what Metroid did. That's why it was so great. I think that if we take things and we take piecemeals of all the things that make games in the past great and then make them into newer and better games, then there you have the future of gaming.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is sort of finding, and you see this with like social networking, what's happened under personalized is a more concentrated, personalized experience.
Completely.
And I think that's why we see RPGs. I think RPGs as a sole entity will slow down, but you'll see the RPG become part of pretty much everything.
Everything.
And you see and like almost whether it's co-op or whether it's a strong single player game like Uncharted, like you're just seeing strong individual experiences that make you feel like you were part of that experience. And I think that, and we see that, and like that's why I think that's easier in games like Dead Space and eco games that are focused isolation. So you can kind of, you're focusing what we like about that experience on a gameplay, on a setting level. But I think you can see that in games like Borderlands or Fallout when you have RPG elements. And I think it's going to be personalization of games.
Even in the most
definitely.
basic, like in the most basic games, character customization is
Yes.
just the steps in the direction towards personalizing that game for you. I never thought I would care about it in games as much as I do now, but I like having me.
It
in
started
games.
it started as a gimmick, and then you get used to it over time, and then we're going to expect that in more games. And I think it is literally the next 10 years is in what personalized game experiences. And I don't like. I've heard some people talk about like the death of the single player game, but games like Uncharted make me
hope not.
confident
No,
that
And Fallout.
if
And
anything,
Fallout, too.
yeah.
if anything, like we're just going to see probably more cooperative games. But I think the single player is going to have a really strong life in the next 10 years.
I think it's going along the same lines. I think we're also going to see a whole lot of smaller games as well. I think a lot of games sort of like fumble sort of that third act that everyone has, usually.
The game outstays its welcome.
Exactly. I think we're for this year, as we've seen, a lot of downloadable titles have really gotten a lot of force behind them. Even like smaller titles like like Flower, the Shadow Complex. I mean, basically these games that are not like these full experiences, but you still have your single player experience, but it's very focused on like what you want
and a more refined but particular gameplay type.
Exactly. And I think we're going to see a whole lot more of that, where you can have games that are very interesting, like Shadow Colossus. Like one of the games I had on here was Portal, which I was it's not a full. I mean, it's like 3-4 hours. But it's such an amazing experience.
It would be
from
nice
start
to see
beginning.
a rebirth in there, because you have your $60 games that you expect a certain amount out of, and then you have downloadable games that range from Bejeweled and Peggle, and then but that middle ground is really what needs to be filled out at this point.
Like Torchlight for me this year was just the Diablo that I've been waiting for so long. While waiting for Diablo 3.
Well, Diablo 2 could have been in our decade. I had it on my other list.
But it is games like that, again, like the Pixel Junk. I mean, it's just these games where people have put in so much creativity and so much love. And
in a really small, directed experience.
Directed experience. And people are more likely to take a chance on something that's small rather than something that's...
It's only $10.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the thing. I think, the rise of the downloadable will allow a lot of these smaller middle games to kind of fill the gap in between.
We'll get experimentation and gameplay types. It's safer to do it in a game that you're not spending too much money on than putting it into a multi-million-dollar, $100 million video game, and you don't know if it's going to resonate with an audience.
It's a place for games that are 4 to 5 hours, where it's not the full box thing, but it's not your small Minesweeper.
It's still a full experience. Like Portal, exactly. I never felt in Portal like I was ever cheated out of something. Like in Portal, it was like, oh my God.
And then everybody asked me, would you pay $60 for just Portal? And I just be a dick. I was like, yeah, I don't want to have this conversation.
It really is. It's about as moot a point as there is. And unfortunately, speaking of moot, we are out of time, so that we can get into our sleeping bags and listen for
Where's Santa?
Bells.
Right over here, Patrick. Why don't you come sit on my lap and tell me what you want?
You actually look like what's-his-face, Attenborough from Jurassic Park. The more I think about it.
I've got a T-Rex in the background.
Hold on to your butts.
Yeah, we got one of those.
On the T-Rex.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Rob Manuel, Patrick Klepek, Abby Happy. Once again, thank you very much to our audience for joining us today. And if you'd like to see more about all the games that we've been reminiscing on for 2010, there's many a list that you can enjoy right now on G4TV.com. We'll be back next week as we close out 2009. See you then.